Hi and welcome to Swedish Plantguys. In this video we give you 40 tips on the Strelitzia Nicolai, also known as the white bird of paradise. Here in Sweden we call it vit papegojblomma, which roughly translates to white parrot flower. Most of the tips will apply to other varieties of Strelitzia. However, this video is specifically on the Nicolai and our over 25 years experience of taking care of that plant. As usual, we will divide this video up into 4 parts. You have the purchase, the planting, the placement and the care of the plant. But we will also have a number for each and every of the 40 tips, and you will see them linked in the description below. Now, if you watch the entire video, you might just get everything worth knowing. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos. Now let's go. So starting off with purchase and number 1. There are 5 different varieties in the genus of Strelitzia. Now this video is about the Nicolai, but you also have the Regina, you have the Alba, you have the Junca, you have the Jancia and the Caudata. So number 2, there are 2 quite common varieties, at least here in Sweden. That is the Nicolai, which I have here, and the Regina, which I have here. Now the differences in appearance is actually quite big. Both of the plants can get really big leaves. However, the Nicolai will get even bigger than the Regina. And as we can see here, they are almost the same size here. But if we take a look at the leaves, we can see some differences in color and also in size already. So as they grow, this will only get bigger and bigger. The Nicolai will actually get huge leaves, whereas the Regina keeps the leaves a little bit smaller. Also, you have the difference in the stem lengths of each leaves. As you can see here right now as well, the leaves are a little bit thicker and smaller on the Regina, whereas the Nicolai usually gets a little bit longer and leggier. Meaning that the appearance will be that the Nicolai will get wider like this, where the Regina is a little bit more compact in appearance. We usually recommend, at least here in Sweden, to use the Nicolai if you want to have your Strelitzia indoors. Now the reason is that it handles the climate indoors a little bit better than the Regina. The Regina actually, to thrive, it wants to have differences in temperature during the day and the night. So if it can get a little bit colder at night, the Regina is perfect. However, if you have it indoors in your living room where it gets the same temperature almost all year round, the Nicolai is a better choice. Number 3. When you purchase your new Strelitzia Nicolai, look at how many stems there are in the pot. You could buy your Strelitzia like this one here, where you only have 1 stem. Now the appearance of this plant is that you get that fan-like shape. However, you can also choose a Strelitzia that has more stems in the same pot. This one actually has 1, 2, 3 stems, and it's almost the same size. However, the appearance becomes quite different. You have a more dense, more compact, and eventually a larger plant. Because as this plant grows, it will get huge on all sides of the pot. Whereas you have 1 stem like this, it will only get bigger to 2 sides of this. So make sure to choose what you want in your home. Now we have seen plants that you can buy that have stems up to maybe 8 or 10 stems in the same pot. But know that that plant will get huge. Number 4, take a look at the roots. Now that could be quite difficult if you have a plant that is not showing you any roots from the bottom of the pot. You actually can see some roots here, but not that much. However, if you have two plants and one of them is actually showing you this, a lot of roots are coming out from the drainage holes in the bottom of the pot, then I would choose that plant because it's showing you that it's feeling well. If you can't see any roots, then you could possibly in the shop, you could go and ask someone to do this for you, but take a look at the roots by just gently tapping the pot and looking to see how the roots are looking. Now, these roots there are actually quite a lot of roots in this pot, and they're also the color we want. You do not want roots that are black or brownish colored. You want roots that are as white as possible. These roots are actually off-white or maybe a little bit duller white, which is also fine. But you never want them to be black or brown, and also you can smell the root ball, because if you have root rot or if there are any problems with the roots, you can usually smell that something is wrong. Number 5, take a look at the leaves at the shop. The leaves should be perfect. So I have 3 different things to look for. First of all, take a look at the leaves all around. They should have no black spots, no brown edges, no yellowing of any of the leaves. They should be perfect. Number 2, the leaves could have these form of cracks on them, as we have on this big leaf here. And this is actually not a bad thing. This is quite common. In its natural environment, where it stands somewhere where it gets quite a lot of wind, for instance, the leaves usually crack like this. Now, indoors, at least here in Sweden, we don't have any wind inside, of course, but we do have low humidity. And that low humidity could also create these cracks in the leaves. And this will probably happen. So if you don't like that, then don't buy the Strelitzia Nicolai, because you will probably get some of that. And number 3, take especially a look at the newest leaves on the plant. We have one here that we can clearly see it hasn't gotten its cuticle yet, meaning that waxy, glossy surface on the leaves. It's starting to develop that. But if this plant should have any pests on them or any problems with pests, usually it's the newest leaves they attack first. So if you take a really good look at the newest leaves, that's usually where you find them. And if you find any pests on a leaf in the shop, pick another plant or go somewhere else. Number 6. When you choose which plant to buy, let's say you have 10 different plants on the table in front of you, which one should you choose? Well, another thing you can look for is that if you have extra shoots coming out from the bottom of the pot, just something small coming out here, that is the plant to choose, because it's actually showing you that it's not only feeling well, it's also growing. Number 7, the Strelitzia Nicolai does flower, and it's actually quite a beautiful flower. It gets its name from the flower, the white bird of paradise, because the Nicolai has a flower that is white and blue and really, really nice. And it also gets the Swedish name from the flower, vit papegojblomma, or white parrot flower, because the flower actually looks like the beak of a bird. But know that if you are going to have your Nicolai indoors, then it will probably never flower, because it actually needs its natural environment to be able to flower. It needs at least 6 hours of sunlight every day, and it also needs that fluctuating temperatures between night and day, and sometimes always a little bit seasonal changes as well, to trigger it to flower. So it will not flower in your home. So you buy the Strelitzia Nicolai for the leaves and the overall appearance of the foliage. Now, if you have succeeded in getting a flower on a Strelitzia Nicolai indoors, please let us know in the comments below. Number 8. When you've finally chosen which Nicolai you should buy in the shop, it's time to transport that plant. And I have 3 things you need to consider here. The first is that the stems of the Nicolai can be quite sensitive sometimes. Meaning that if you take this outside and it's heavy wind, it could quite easily snap the stems here. It's quite easy to do. And also if you are bumping into something or you're trying to shove it into a car or any way of transport, take a little care so that you don't break the stems. Now the Nicolai is not that sensitive to low temperatures. So when you transport, it's usually not a problem. It wants a temperature somewhere in between 18 to 27 degrees Celsius or 64 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. However, if it is freezing outside, you might want to wrap the plant in something, paper or plastic. Just ask the shop to do that for you so that it won't harm the plant when you're taking it home. So moving on to planting. And number 9. When you get your plant to your home, do not do a repot. Now the reason is that when your plant arrives in your home, it's quite stressed. So a repot is usually too stressful for that already stressed plant. So our recommendation is that you wait at least 6 months before you do that first repot. And if the plant is not showing you any roots from the drainage holes in the bottom of the pot here, you could actually wait quite a lot longer than that. Now, after you've done the first repot, it is our experience that you could wait 2 to 3 years before doing a new repot again. Number 10. So when is the right time to do a repot in the year? Well, we usually say that it is when the plant is active. And this plant is active during spring and autumn. In spring, it usually sends out new growth from the foliage. And in autumn, it's actually quite active down by the roots. So we do a repot either early spring, before it starts to grow, or in early autumn, before that root growth starts. Number 11. When you do a repot, no matter if it's the first one or the 5th one, always use drainage holes in the bottom of the pot. It's our experience that this is a plant that does not want to stand in water. So by having drainage holes in the bottom of the pot, that means that when you have watered your plant, you can get rid of that excess water down by the roots in the bottom of the pot. Number 12. When doing a repot, always choose a new pot that is slightly larger than the last one. What I mean by that is if you have a plant in this size of a container, or this size of a pot, you never want to go to this size immediately, because you want to go for a slightly larger pot. The reason for this is that when you go from this small one to the huge one here, all of that soil around the roots will absorb and hold quite a lot of water, and it will take a long time before that water starts to dry up, meaning that it could potentially harm the roots. So just move up to a slightly larger pot, maybe 1 or 2 sizes bigger, might even 3 sizes bigger, and you will be fine. Number 13. Which type of a soil should you use for your Strelitzia Nicolai? Our recommendation is that you can use a standard planting soil. Make sure that it is a good quality one, meaning that it has quite a lot of organic materials in it. And you want to mix that standard planting soil with something that gives it better drainage, because standard planting soil has the ability to hold on to quite a lot of water, and it could be too much water. So you want a better drainage in that soil. Now you can do that by mixing it with, for instance, as I have here, some pumice. You could also use perlite or leca pebbles like this. They have the same function by adding drainage to that standard planting soil. Now, how much should you use? Well, you should use somewhere in between 70 to 80% of standard planting soil, a good one, and 20 to 30% of pumice, leca or perlite. That is a perfect mix for the Nicolai. Number 14, when you repot your Nicolai, you could also use what we call pure pumice. This is pure pumice. It's actually not pure because it is pumice that is a volcanic material or mineral. If you want to know more about pumice, we have a video you can go and watch. And it is mixed with some clay in this instance. But what I mean by pure pumice is that we only use this. We don't use the standard planting soil, just the pumice when we repot. You actually keep the soil that you already have when you bought your Strelitzia Nicolai, and you add pumice all around, underneath and all around. This will also work perfectly because that good drainage and lots of oxygen for the roots will be perfect and will make your Strelitzia thrive. Number 15. When you're repotting a Strelitzia, you could also use a self-watering pot or container. What is that? Well, it's actually a pot that could look something like this, where you have an inner pot and an outer pot. And self-watering containers works fine with the Strelitzia Nicolai. The context here is that when you plant in the inner pot here, eventually the roots will start to grow out and grow down into the water reservoir, meaning you have water here all the time in the outer pot. Now, why doesn't that harm the Strelitzia? Because we said before that it doesn't want to stand in water. Well, it doesn't want to stand in water together with soil or other substrate you have here. But when you have so-called water roots growing down into the water reservoir, that won't harm the plant. It will actually help it to thrive. So a self-watering container is a good choice for the Strelitzia. So moving on to placement and number 16. We usually try and look at the natural habitat of a plant at this channel because that will help us to know exactly what it wants to thrive. If we can recreate their natural habitat, for instance, especially for this plant, you could actually make it flower as well. So the natural habitat for this plant is actually the coastal forests of southern parts of Africa. Now, what does that give us? What type of information does that give us? Well, it will probably mean that it wants high temperatures, high humidity, and it could withstand some high winds or coastal sea winds. Number 17, temperature. This is a plant that wants to have a temperature somewhere around 18 to 27 degrees Celsius or 64 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. But it could withstand higher temperatures than that, and it could also withstand lower temperatures. But if it does that, then something actually changes for the overall appearance of the plant. If you give it higher temperatures, what will happen is that it will grow a little bit quicker, and when it grows, the stems here will become quite large and leggy. And the opposite is then, of course, true. If you can get it a little bit lower temperatures during the night, it will grow slower and it will also get quite thicker stems, and the intermediates, meaning the length of the stems, will also be a little bit shorter. As you can see on this huge plant in the foreground here, it actually doesn't have that long stems. They have short, really thick stems like this and huge leaves. So even though it is quite a large plant, if this was standing in only room temperature, the stems here would probably go all the way down to the camera here. So the temperature matters. Number 18, light. This is a plant, one of the few indoor tropical plants actually, that thrive in direct sunlight. So this could be placed somewhere where it gets a lot of sunlight. Now, when you have bought your plant, it might not be used to direct sunlight because it might have been standing at the growers and getting lots of indirect sunlight and then in the shop. So you might want to ease it into a direct sunlight placement. Number 19. We have noticed in our experience that once your plant has rooted itself, meaning that it's been standing for a couple of months in your home, you could start to move it to a darker placement. And it will actually also thrive there. However, know that when you do that, it will, first of all, it will start to grow a little bit slower, which could be a good thing, but because this is a plant that gets huge. So if you can prolong that time, that could actually be a good thing. So by not giving it direct sunlight, perhaps giving it indirect sunlight or a little bit darker, it will not become as huge as fast. It will of course also need less water, so you will be watering it with a longer frequency in between every watering. Now, if you have moved your plant to a darker spot somewhere in your home and you see that the newest leaves, as they start to grow out here, they're actually not unfolding. They are just dying instead. That is a clear sign that you've placed it somewhere where it's not getting enough light. So it's a little bit too dark, just move it somewhere where it gets more light. Number 20. Now the best placement in your home for your Strelitzia here in the northern hemisphere is a southern placement next to a window, meaning that it gets a lot of light. And also a couple of hours a day it will get sunlight. Well, maybe not here in Sweden, but in the other parts of Europe or other parts of the northern hemisphere. Now, other placement that also can be fine is of course in a western or an eastern placement somewhere near a window, because then it will get some direct sunlight but mostly lots of indirect sunlight. Number 21. This is a plant that actually likes quite a high humidity. And here in the southern parts of Sweden that is a problem indoors, especially in wintertime. It wants somewhere between 60 and 80% of humidity. Now, here in Sweden, that's a problem almost all year round because we have somewhere between 40 and 60. So in summertime, perhaps we meet those standards of 60%. However, we have noticed that it's not a huge problem. You can see that the plants can get a little bit stressed, especially if you have a home where the humidity goes below 40%, might even down to 30% in wintertime. It can start to struggle. What will happen is that it will stop growing, and you will also see that parts of the leaves will start to get brown edges. And also the new growth can just completely disintegrate. It just stops and then nothing happens and it dies. That is an indication that the humidity is not high enough. Now, an easy way to rectify your humidity problem is to either use a humidifier, which can be quite expensive, or you could just use a tray with water, put some pebbles in there as well, and put that next to your plant. And that water will start to evaporate and help with the humidity around the plant. Number 22. If you live somewhere in the world, like here in Sweden, where it gets really cold in wintertime, meaning that your radiators at home will be at full blast and will get really, really hot. Then if you have your Strelitzia close to a radiator, make sure to move it away from that, because it could potentially harm the plant. It will stress the plant and eventually harm the leaves, or even you could even get a pest problem because of that stress. Number 23, another problem you can have if you live somewhere where the winters get really cold is, of course, indoors you can get drafts. Now, a lot of indoor tropical plants can actually have a problem with drafts, but the Strelitzia is luckily not one of those. But if you notice that you get problems during wintertime, it can either be, as we said before, humidity problem or drafts. So make sure to move your plant. So moving on to the care of the plant. Number 24, we have to start with how do you water your Strelitzia Nicolai? Well, we like to think like this. It's more about when do we water our Strelitzia Nicolai. What I mean by that is it's not about how much water you give. I'll show you that in a while. It's more about when do you water. And it is time to water your Strelitzia when the topsoil is dry 1 to 2 inches or 2.5 to 5 centimeters down into the pot. So just use your finger, feel down into the soil like this. If you notice that it is moist or wet, then you wait. And then you wait and you feel it again. But when it's dry, then it's time to water. So how do you water? It usually looks like this in our homes. We have an outer pot and we have an inner pot with drainage holes. So what you do is that you take your watering can and then you water quite a lot, all the way around the stems, all the way on top of the soil, and make sure that all the soil gets wet. But this is really, really important, because you can see here what happens is that all of the excess water that the soil has not absorbed will go down into the outer pot. So now when it stops dripping here, it's time to remove that excess water in the outer pot, and then you wait again until the topsoil is dry, just like I showed you. Number 25. If your Strelitzia Nicolai gets brown tips on the edges of the leaves or on the tips of the leaves like this, and when you feel it, it's actually dry. You can actually hear how dry it is. Then this is a sign of either low humidity or not enough water. Number 26. If your plant gets a brown edge or a brown tip that is not dry, it's actually soft to the touch, this is a sign that the plant has gotten too much water. Usually you can also see that all of the plant is starting to droop a little like this. Number 27. If your plant gets brown leaves, entire leaves including the stem, and the leaf is actually crunchy like this, then this is a clear sign that it's not gotten enough water. So what you do is that you increase the frequency with how often you water. Number 28. If your plant gets yellowing of the leaves, meaning that the leaves are not green anymore, they start to become yellow like this, this is an indication that you either gave it too much water or not enough water. It can actually show itself like this in both those different varieties. So what you do is that you make sure to feel the soil before you water again, to see if it could be not enough water or too much water. If it continues to be a problem, do a repot and make sure that you don't have problem with the roots. Number 29. If your plant gets black spots on the leaves, this is an indication that you could have root problems. And in worst case, you could have something called root rot. Now, the first thing you do is to make sure that the plant dries up completely. Now, I don't mean that the topsoil dries up as we said in how you should water it. I mean all of the root ball should dry up completely. This could, if you have a small root problem, rectify the problem. However, if you see that that is not working, then you have to make a repot. When you do that, if you have root rot, you will see that some of the roots are actually black or brown, and they also have a distinctive nasty smell to them. Make sure to remove all of those roots and only keep the roots that are good, meaning the roots that are white or off-white. Number 30, if the leaves of your plant is starting to lose its color. Now, what I mean by that is it's starting to look a little bit dull or shaded in color. As you can see here on this leaf here, then you could have one or two problems. This could be a nutrient deficiency problem, or it could be pests. Now, the pests are actually starting to attack and bite into the leaves and sucking out the nutrients. So basically, it's also a nutrient deficiency problem. But if you have pests, then you have to deal with the pests, of course. If you can't find any pests, you can't find anything other that is wrong, it could be a nutrient deficiency. Then just start adding some nutrients when you water your plant. One way of knowing the differences, if it's pests or if it's a nutrient deficiency problem, is by checking the newest leaves of the plant here, because that is usually where the pests attack first. So if it's only the newest leaves that are starting to look dull and not all the other leaves, then it's probably a pest problem. But if it's all of the leaves at the same time, it could be a nutrient deficiency. Now, just to add something here, the newest leaf usually have a different color than the older leaves. And this is because it doesn't have a cuticle yet. It's not fully developed. So this is not what I mean by losing its color, or because it's more like looking shaded, that something is clearly wrong. Number 31, if your plant starts to get curled leaves, and it looks something like this. The leaves are actually starting to curl themselves inwards. It could actually also look something like this. This means that it's not getting enough water, or the humidity is extremely low. What the plant is actually doing here is that it's trying to keep the water inside of the plant. If you're not watering it enough, or if it's low humidity, it doesn't have enough water inside of the plant, and most of the water is evaporating from the leaves of the stomatas here on the leaves, meaning that it's trying to curl itself like this to keep the humidity, keep the water inside of the leaves. Number 32. If the new leaves on your plant never fully develop or never grow out to become a leaf, it could look something like this, and it could look something like this as well. This is usually a sign that either your plant hasn't got enough light or you have a root problem. So start by moving your plant somewhere where it gets more indirect light or even some direct sunlight. And now if it looks like this, you can actually cut off the new leaf completely, because this will never fully develop. But when you move it to a lighter spot and then you see that the new leaves coming out are fully developing, then it was a light problem. However, if that doesn't work, then you need to do a repot to make sure that you don't have problems with the roots. And when you do that repot, make sure to follow all of our advice on which type of a soil and what type of drainage you use. Number 33. if your plant gets something called leggy growth, meaning that the newest leaves, when they come out, they get really, really long stems like this. And the stems are tiny and really, really leggy like this. They should look something like this, where you have really thick but short stems. But if they become really, really long, you have either a light problem or you have a temperature problem. First off, if you have a light problem, it's usually because it's not getting enough light. So, meaning that when it's standing in that dark spot, it's actually trying to move towards the light. So just move it somewhere where it gets more indirect sunlight or even perhaps direct sunlight, and this will solve the problem. However, it could also be a temperature problem, meaning that usually indoors we have the same temperature indoors all year around. And this is not what it wants and what it gets in its natural habitat. So, by moving your plant in summertime, for instance, by moving your plant at night and placing it outside perhaps, or on your balcony, in a greenhouse, a conservatory, an atrium, somewhere where the temperature goes down a little bit, and then moving it inside again during the day, this will help that new growth to become smaller and thicker. Number 34. This is a plant that wants some fertilizer when it's active. Usually that means that it's in springtime or in autumn. And what our recommendation is that you try and add a complete coverage fertilizer, a standard fertilizer for indoor tropical plants, and that you mix that up with the water and you give it to the plant as you're watering it. But remember, fertilizer is not food for the plant. You can look at it like this. It's almost the same as vitamins for us humans. It's just a supplement that helps different processes within our bodies. Same thing with fertilizer, but for plants. Number 35. This is a plant with huge leaves. As you can see, it will become enormous. That also means that inside of your home, it will collect dust. So it's our recommendation that at least once a month, you just take a microfiber cloth used for cleaning. You make sure that it's moist or wet, and then you just wipe off the leaves, removing all of that dust from the leaves. And while you're doing this, also do it on the underside of the leaf. Number 36. It's usually not necessary to mist your plants with water like this. It's our experience that this can potentially actually stress the plant more than it's helping it. The reason is simple. Now that I have misted the plant, it's a little bit wet on the leaves, and you've raised the humidity for quite a short period of time. Meaning that in perhaps 10 or 15 minutes, this will be gone. And we're down to our standard humidity level again. Then you come a couple of days later and you mist it again, you raise the humidity, then it goes down quite quickly again. This up and down all the time stresses the plant. It's actually better to have the same humidity over time. So humidity should only change naturally indoors, or if you have, for instance, a humidifier that raises the humidity all the time. What you could do, however, is that you could once or twice a year take the plant, move it into your shower and completely rinse it off. That's only a good thing, meaning that you get rid of all the dust, you get rid of all the particles on the leaves, but it's not about raising that humidity. Number 37. You can prune off the leaves of your Strelitzia Nicolai, but it's not like a lot of other tropical plants where when you prune off a leaf, another one arrives. So know that when you've pruned off that leaf, it's not going to get another one. But you can do it, and usually we do it like this. So as you can see here, we have a huge one, and one of the stems here is actually quite leggy and a lot bigger than the other ones. So you can remove that without harming the plant. And you do it like this. You take a shearer or a scissor, make sure that it's sharp and that it's clean as well. You could use some alcohol as well. It's to make sure that you have no bacteria or transferring something from another plant to this plant. So make sure that it's clean. Then you can try and just cut off this. As you can see here, I'm actually doing it at an angle, and I'm trying to do it as if we had a small pyramid of the complete plant here. So I'm going to go upwards to the middle point here, and we also have a new leaf that's coming out here. So if I pruned it all the way down here, that leaf will never arrive. So I'm actually going to prune it up here, and then afterwards, when this leaf has come up, then you might be able to prune it a little bit further down. So just taking away that bit here. But I'm pruning it as if you had a triangle. Like that. Now this leaf is off. You could place this leaf in water. It will not create new roots. You will not get a cutting from this, but you will have a cut flower or use it as a cut flower. Number 38. It is possible to propagate your Strelitzia Nicolai. And there are actually two ways of doing that. The first one is by division. What I mean by that is that you can have a plant that has several stems like this. We have 1, 2, 3 stems. This could potentially become 3 different plants by division. So you just remove it from its pot, and then you gently separate the different stems or different plants from each other. And then you repot those into 3 new pots, and then you have 3 new plants. Make sure to be really, really careful when you're dividing the stems. You will probably harm some of the roots, but you do not want to harm most of the roots. Now the second method is from seed, which usually means that you've had a flower that's created that seed. And because you will probably never get a flower indoors from your Strelitzia Nicolai, you won't have a seed. But if you have a seed, it could be that you live somewhere where you have a Strelitzia Nicolai outdoors in its natural habitat. Then you could get seeds. Before you plant that seed into soil, make sure to soak it completely in water for at least 24 hours before doing that, because that will trigger it to start to grow. When you either divide or try to plant some seeds, make sure that you are using a well-drained soil. Number 39, pests. Now it's our experience that the Strelitzia Nicolai doesn't have a lot of pest problems. However, it can happen. When that happens, it's usually best to discover that early, because then you can rectify the problem quite quickly and easily. So look at the leaves of your plants quite often, so that if you get pests, you will recognize that and you can deal with it quickly. Just look at the leaves, look at the top of the leaves, the bottom of the leaves, look at the stems as well, and especially take a look at the newest leaves here. If you have a new leaf, it doesn't have a fully developed cuticle yet, meaning it doesn't have that glossy, hard surface of the leaves. So the pests actually have it easier to bite through the new leaves because of that. The Strelitzia has quite a thick cuticle, meaning that is one of the reasons it usually doesn't get a pest problem. But the cuticle can get damaged by, for instance, stress. So if you have a humidity problem in your home, meaning you have low humidity or might even extremely high humidity, that can stress the plant and you could get pests. Now, here in Sweden, the most common pests that attack a Strelitzia Nicolai is either mites, usually spider mites, and that's usually the newest leaves that get attacked first because they don't have the ability to bite through a fully formed cuticle on the Strelitzia, or mealybugs and scale. Now, mealybugs and scale are quite easy to see with the naked eye. Mites are so small that they're hard to see. But mealybugs and scale, so you can see them on the leaves. And when you see something on the leaves that's not supposed to be there, just use a microfiber cloth and remove them from the leaves. Just wipe the leaves with a moist towel like this, or a moist cloth. This usually is all that is necessary. However, if you haven't gotten it early, you could have it on the entire plant. Then it's our recommendation that you go out and buy a pesticide. Make sure that that pesticide is capable of handling the pest you have, and then just follow the instructions on the label. Now, if you're not quick enough, the leaves could start to look like something like this. What has happened here is it's actually mites that have attacked this leaf. And they're so small that you can't see them, especially if it's not spider mites, because spider mites, then you can see it almost looks like a spider has been on the leaf. You can see the web from the spider mites. But there are other types of mites that actually don't create webs like that, and you can't see them. So you can see that the leaf is just starting to look dull. You can get problems with on the edges of the leaves, on the tips of the leaves, and when you have a high concentration of pests on the leaves, the entire leaf starts just looking a little bit dull or yellowish. Number 40, know that this is a plant that is mildly poisonous. And it is the sap of the plant that is poisonous. It has something called calcium oxalate crystals in it. So if you, your child or your pet have ingested a part of this plant, make sure to call poison control in your country or directly to the emergency call center. Now, if you've watched the entire video, you might just have gotten what we call everything worth knowing. Now, what did you think? Did we miss something? Let us know in the comments below, and give us a big thumbs up if you liked the video. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do. Hit the bell as well so you get a notification every time we put up something new. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, where you can get sneak previews on upcoming videos and sometimes a little bit more. Now, until next time, hej då!